I packed my bags at 3 a.m. while my husband slept. After 5 years of marriage, I finally understood the truth. I was never his priority. His mother was, and tonight, she proved it in the worst way possible. Hello everyone, I'm Sophia, and wow, welcome back. If you're new here, let me tell you what we do. I share real and emotional stories sent by listeners from all around the world. And these aren't just any stories, they're about love, loss, difficult choices, and everything in between. The best part, these stories can help you learn English and reflect on life at the same time. So you're not just improving your English, you're also connecting with real human experiences. And honestly, that's what makes this so special. Oh, and if you enjoy this content, please don't forget to like the video. It really helps. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we share new stories every week. And I'd love to hear from you, so share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with the choices people make? Would you do things differently? Let me know. All right, now let's begin today's story. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and I've been married to Daniel for 5 years. When I met him 7 years ago, I thought he was perfect. He was kind, attentive, and always made me feel special. He would bring me flowers for no reason, remember little details about my day, and tell me I was the most important person in his life. I believed him. I really believed him. But looking back now, I realize I was never the most important person. His mother was Margaret, my mother-in-law, was always very present in our relationship. From the beginning, she called Daniel every single day, sometimes twice a day. She would show up at our apartment without calling first, always with some excuse. She brought food. She wanted to check if we needed anything. She missed her son. Daniel would smile and hug her, saying, "Mom, you don't need to call before coming. This is your home too." But it wasn't her home. It was ours. I tried to be understanding. Daniel's father left when he was young, and Margaret raised him alone. She sacrificed everything for him. I told myself she was just lonely. The first real warning sign came 6 months after our wedding. Daniel and I were planning our first vacation together, just the two of us. We wanted to go to the beach, relax, and enjoy being newlyweds. But when Margaret found out, she cried. She said she felt abandoned, that she had no one else, that she couldn't believe her son would leave her alone. Daniel immediately felt guilty. He looked at me with those sad eyes and said, "Maybe we can take her with us." Just this time, I said no. We fought for the first time, and for the first time, I saw him choose her feelings over mine. After that, things started to change. Margaret began to give her opinion about everything in our lives. She didn't like the color we painted the living room too dark, she said. She thought our furniture was too modern, not cozy enough. She commented on my cooking, my clothes, even my job. "Sarah works too much," she would tell Daniel. "A wife should be home more." And the worst part, Daniel never defended me. He would just say, "She doesn't mean it like that," or "She's from a different generation." I started to feel like a guest in my own marriage. I tried to talk to Daniel many times. I told him we needed boundaries, that his mother couldn't be involved in every decision we made. He would nod and say, "You're right, I'll talk to her." But he never did. Or if he did, nothing changed. Margaret kept calling, kept visiting, kept interfering, and Daniel kept allowing it. I felt invisible. I felt like I was competing for my own husband's attention, and I was losing. But I loved him, so I stayed. I convinced myself that things would get better. I was wrong. 2 years into our marriage, Margaret's involvement in our lives became even more intense. She had a key to our apartment, and she started coming over when we weren't home. I would arrive after work and find things moved around, dishes rearranged in the cabinets, my clothes folded differently, even our bed made in a way I never made it. When I asked Daniel about it, he said, "She's just trying to help, Sarah. She's being nice." But it didn't feel nice. It felt like an invasion, like she was marking her territory, showing me that this space belonged to her son first and to me second. The real problem started when we began talking about having children. I was 29, Daniel was 31, and we both wanted to start a family. We were excited. making plans, imagining our future. But when Margaret found out, her reaction shocked me. She sat us down and said, "I think you should wait. You're not ready. Sarah's career is too demanding. And Daniel, you're still young. You have time." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something, to tell his mother that this was our decision, not hers. But he stayed quiet. And later that night, he said, "Maybe she has a point. Maybe we should wait a little longer." But life doesn't always wait for the perfect moment. 3 months later, I discovered I was pregnant. I was terrified to tell Daniel because I knew what was coming. When I finally told him, he was happy at first. He hugged me, kissed me, said we were going to be great parents. But then he said, "We need to tell my mother." My heart sank. We went to Margaret's house that same evening. I watched her face as Daniel told her the news. She didn't smile. She didn't congratulate us. She looked at me and said, "This is too soon. I told you to wait. This is a mistake." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stood up and said, "Margaret, this is our baby. This is not a mistake." But she ignored me and turned to Daniel. "You're not ready to be a father," she said. "You still need me. How are you going to take care of a baby when you can barely take care of yourself?" And Daniel, my husband, the father of my child, looked at his mother and said, "I know, Mom, we'll figure it out. Not we're ready, not we'll be fine, not this is good news." He agreed with her. He made me feel like our baby was a problem, not a blessing. 2 weeks later, I lost the baby. It was a miscarriage at 10 weeks. My world collapsed. I was heartbroken, devastated, empty. Daniel held me while I cried, but something felt distant, and then Margaret came over. She hugged Daniel first, not me. She said, "Maybe this is for the best. You weren't ready anyway. God has a plan." I stared at her in disbelief. My baby had just died, and she was calling it for the best. I waited for Daniel to say something, to defend me, to tell his mother to leave. But he didn't. He just stood there, between us, saying nothing. And in that moment, I realized he would always choose her. Even when I was breaking, even when I needed him most, he would choose her. After losing the baby, I threw myself into my work. It was the only thing that made sense anymore, the only place where I felt valued and respected. My company noticed my dedication, and 6 months later, my boss called me into her office with incredible news. I was being promoted to regional manager. It was everything I had worked for: better salary, more responsibility, the recognition I deserved. There was only one challenge. The position required me to move to Seattle for 2 years to open and manage a new office. It was a temporary relocation, but it was mandatory. And it was the opportunity of my lifetime. I was nervous to tell Daniel, but I was also excited. I thought maybe this could be good for USA. Fresh start in a new city, away from Margaret's constant presence. That evening, I made his favorite dinner and told him about the promotion. At first, he was genuinely happy for me. He hugged me and said, "Sarah, this is amazing. You've worked so hard for this. I'm so proud of you." We talked about Seattle, about finding a nice apartment, about how it could be an adventure for both of us. For the first time in months, I felt like we were a team again. I felt like maybe our marriage could survive. But then Daniel said he needed to tell his mother. My stomach dropped. I said, "Daniel, this is our decision. We don't need her permission." He looked at me like I had said something cruel. "She's my mother, Sarah. I can't just move to another city without telling her. She'll be alone." I wanted to scream. She was a 50, 80-year-old woman with friends, hobbies, and a full life. She wouldn't be alone. She would just be without her son for 2 years. But I stayed calm and said, "Okay, tell her. But remember, this is about my career, about our future." He nodded, but I could already see the doubt in his eyes. The next day, Daniel went to have lunch with Margaret. He was gone for 4 hours. When he came home, he was different, quiet, tense, avoiding my eyes. I asked him how it went, and he sat down with his head in his hands. "She's really upset," Sarah, he said. She cried the whole time. She said she can't do this, that she can't be alone, that she needs me here. I felt anger rising in my chest. Daniel, she's manipulating you. She does this every time we try to make a decision for ourselves. He looked at me with frustration and said, "You don't understand. You have your parents, your sister. She only has me. I'm all she has." We argued for hours. I told him this was my career, my dream, that I had supported him through everything, and now I needed him to support me. He said he wanted to, but he couldn't abandon his mother. I asked him, "What about abandoning me? What about my needs?" He had no answer. The conversation went in circles until I was exhausted. Finally, Daniel said something that shattered me completely. "I can't leave my mother, Sarah. I just can't. She needs me here. You have to choose. Take the job and go alone, or stay here with me, but I'm not moving to Seattle." He was asking me to choose between my marriage and my career, and he didn't see anything wrong with that. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got here. How did I become the villain for wanting my husband to support my career? How did his mother's feelings become more important than mine? I thought about all the times I had compromised, all the times I had stayed quiet, all the times I had put Margaret's comfort above my own happiness. And for what? For a marriage where I would always come second. I needed answers. I needed to understand why Daniel couldn't see what was happening. So I decided to do something I had never done before. I would talk to Margaret directly, without Daniel there. 2 days later, I went to Margaret's house. I had rehearsed what I would say come, respectful, honest. I would tell her that I loved her son, that I wasn't trying to take him away from her, that 2 years wasn't forever. I would ask her to support this opportunity for us. When I arrived, Margaret seemed surprised to see me alone. She let me in and offered me tea, acting pleasant and kind. But before I could start the conversation I had planned, I heard her phone ring in the kitchen. She excused herself to answer it, and I sat in the living room, waiting, nervous, trying to stay calm. That's when I heard her voice from the kitchen. She was talking to someone, laughing, speaking louder than she realized, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "Oh, Daniel already told me he's not going," she said to whoever was on the phone. "I knew he wouldn't. He would never leave me for some job. Sarah is pushing him, but he knows where his loyalty is." She laughed again, and then said something I will never forget. "Daniel always does what I want. I raised him right. That girl is going to learn her place eventually. She thinks she can just take my son away? Please. He'll never put a woman before his mother. Never." I sat there, frozen, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. This wasn't love. This wasn't a mother worried about being alone. This was control. This was manipulation. Margaret wasn't afraid of losing her son. She was afraid of losing her power over him. And Daniel, my husband, the man I had built a life with, was letting it happen. He wasn't weak or confused. He had made a choice. He had chosen to prioritize his mother's control over our partnership. I stood up quietly, walked to the door, and left without saying a word. Margaret didn't even notice I was gone. I drove home in a daze, tears streaming down my face. When I arrived, Daniel was there, watching television like nothing was wrong. I stood in front of him and told him everything I had heard. I repeated Margaret's words exactly. He'll never put a woman before his mother. I waited for shock, for anger, for him to finally see the truth. But instead, Daniel sighed and said, "Sarah, you're taking it out of context. She didn't mean it like that. My mother loves you. She's just worried about being alone. You're being dramatic." That was the moment I knew nothing would ever change. No matter what Margaret did, no matter how much she hurt me, Daniel would always defend her, and I would always be the one blamed for not understanding. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I moved through the house like a ghost, barely speaking to Daniel. He tried to act normal, as if our conversation had never happened, as if I hadn't just told him that his mother admitted to controlling him. Every time he tried to touch me or talk to me, I felt sick. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. I started to see everything clearly now, all the years of manipulation. All the times Margaret had pulled the strings, and Daniel had danced exactly the way she wanted. The surprise visits weren't about loneliness. They were about monitoring us. The crying wasn't about fear, it was about getting her way. And Daniel's inability to set boundaries wasn't about love, it was about being trained since childhood to put his mother first. Always. I called my company and asked for more time to make my decision about Seattle. My boss was understanding but told me I had 1 week to decide if I would take the opportunity of a lifetime or sacrifice my career for a marriage that was already broken. I spent those days thinking about everything about the woman I was when I met Daniel, and the woman I had become. I had lost myself in this marriage. I had become smaller, quieter, always walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting Margaret. I had given up friends because Margaret didn't like them. I had skipped family events because Margaret needed Daniel that day. I had even delayed my own career advancement because Margaret thought I worked too much. And what had I gotten in return? A husband who couldn't choose me even once. On the 5th day, Daniel finally tried to have a serious conversation. He sat me down and said, "Sarah, I love you. I don't want to lose you, but I can't abandon my mother. Can't you take a different position, one that doesn't require moving?" I looked at him and asked the question that had been burning in my mind. If your mother told you to choose between her and me, who would you choose? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay in bed next to Daniel, listening to him breathe, and I realized something heartbreaking. I had been fighting a battle I could never win. Margaret would always be his priority, and I would always be the outsider trying to earn a place in my own marriage. I deserved more than that. I deserved a partner, not someone who needed his mother's permission to love me. And in that moment, at 3 a.m., I made my decision. I got out of bed as quietly as I could. Daniel was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I stood there for a moment, looking at him, remembering the man I fell in love with 7 years ago. That man seemed so far away now, buried under years of his mother's control and his own inability to break free. I felt sad, but I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that I was finally going to choose myself. Relief that I was finally going to stop fighting for someone who would never fully choose me. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and started packing. I took only what I needed: clothes, documents, some personal items. Everything else could stay. I didn't want anything that would remind me of this apartment, of this life where I was never enough. As I folded my clothes and placed them in the suitcase, tears rolled down my face. Not tears of regret, but tears of grief. I was grieving the marriage I thought I would have, the partner I thought Daniel would be, the future I had imagined that would never exist. When my suitcase was full, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. I knew Daniel wouldn't understand if I just left without explaining, and I needed to say things I couldn't say to his face anymore. My hand shook as I wrote, "Daniel, I can't do this anymore. I can't compete with your mother for your love and attention. I shouldn't have to. A marriage is supposed to be a partnership, but I've been in this alone for years. Every time I needed you to stand up for me, you chose her. Every time I needed you to set boundaries, you made excuses." I continued writing. "I heard what your mother said, that you'll never put a woman before her. And when I told you, you called me dramatic instead of being horrified. That's when I knew nothing would ever change. You're not a bad person, Daniel, but you're not ready to be a husband. You're still your mother's son, and that's all you'll ever be until you decide to break free. I deserve a partner who chooses our marriage, not someone who needs permission to love me. I deserve to be someone's priority, not their second choice." I finished the letter with the hardest part. I'm taking the job in Seattle. I'm choosing my career, my future, and myself. I've spent 5 years putting your mother's feelings above my own, and I won't do it anymore. I hope one day you'll understand that love shouldn't feel like a competition. I hope one day you'll find the courage to live your own life. But I can't wait for that day anymore. I have to go. Goodbye, Daniel. I folded the letter, put it on the table where he would see it, and took one last look around the apartment. At 3:30 a.m., I walked out the door with my suitcase and didn't look back. I drove to my sister's house, where I stayed for the next 2 weeks while I prepared for my move to Seattle. Daniel called me dozens of times, left voicemails crying and begging me to come home, to talk, to work things out. But I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. He sent texts saying he loved me, that he would change, that he would talk to his mother. But I had heard those promises before, and they never meant anything. Margaret, of course, called me, too. Her voicemail was exactly what I expected. "Sarah, you're being selfish. How can you do this to Daniel? How can you abandon him like this? He loves you, and this is how you repay him." I deleted the message without listening to the whole thing. Her words had no power over me anymore. I had finally seen her for what she truly was, not a loving mother, but a woman who had built her entire identity around controlling her son. And I had finally seen Daniel for what he was, not the partner I needed, but a man who would never break free. 6 months have passed since I left. I'm living in Seattle now, thriving in my new position, meeting new people, rediscovering who I am outside of that marriage. I won't lie, there are days when I miss Daniel, or at least the idea of him. There are moments when I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I remember how small I felt in that apartment, how invisible I was in my own marriage, how exhausted I was from constantly fighting for basic respect, and I know I made the right choice. Last week, Daniel called me one more time. He said he missed me, that he wanted to try again. But when I asked if he had moved out of his mother's house, there was silence. He still lived with Margaret. Nothing had changed. I told him I wished him well and hung up. I had finally chosen myself, and that was the only choice that mattered. Wow, that was intense, wasn't it? Every time I share one of these stories, I'm reminded of how complex life can be. I truly believe that every story has something to teach us. Sometimes it's about love, sometimes it's about loss, and sometimes it's just about being human and making difficult choices. So, what do you think about today's story? I really want to know your opinion. Do you agree with the choices that were made? Would you do things differently? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and honestly, I love reading your perspectives. Sometimes you guys see things that I completely miss. Oh, and if this story touched your heart, if you felt something while listening, please give it a like. It really helps more people discover these stories. And don't forget to subscribe. We share new emotional stories every week. And trust me, we have some incredible ones coming up. And if you have your own story you'd like to share, something that's been on your mind or weighing on your heart, send it to me. You never know, your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Take care of yourselves, okay? And remember, life is complicated, but we're all doing our best. See you in the next story.